All right. I'm now about to share the learner guide for cluster 4, which covers safety and risk. And this is quite important, in any industry and in any workplace. I think this video really is just to explain certain sections of the learner guide, just to help you understand the importance of the information that is being seen in the learner guide, has been included in there, and might actually also give some further information to help you understand particular topics. So I'm going to make this as brief as possible, and this will be a compilation of videos that will help you understand the learner guide more. Okay, so now when it comes to work health and safety, we are talking about ensuring that there is safety within the workplace in a particular work area. So if you notice, we're being very specific in the title. With BSB WHS 502, it actually or 523, I'm sorry, 523 talks about how you can ensure the safety, okay, within a work area, not just a workplace. Because a workplace could have different elements into it. But when you say work area, it's direct, it's exactly that affects you and what you can actually impact and who you can impact where you are, all right? So we talk about the legislation. Now, it is important to note that West Australia and Victoria follow a different Work Health and Safety Act. Now, this resource here still speaks about the Occupational Health and Safety Act in 1984, but they have since updated that just recently to Work Health and Safety Act 2021. With the rest of the other states, including Queensland, Tasmania, New South Wales, Northern Territory, and South Australia, we are still following the Work Health and Safety Act 2011. So they're different. So whichever state you go, you need to refer to that. How you get access to this is very simple. You'll be able to find that in your organization, a link to it or a copy to it, or external websites, of governing bodies, right? So like WorkSafe or Safe Work. You should be able to find a copy of the most updated Work Health and Safety Act document or publication. Okay. Now, just to explain to you how this goes, we have the act right on top, okay, which is then the basis of everything else at the bottom, including what we call the regulations and mandatory standards, okay? And then from that mandatory standards, the mandatory standards is more on how something should look like, okay? So what the outcome should be once you have followed the act. So it gives you a bit of a vision or an idea of what it should look like, just the outcome. But if you go a little bit lower to that, okay, the code of practice actually supports the standards, and it also supports the act. So the code of practice are guidelines, okay? Though they're not mandatory, following them, okay, for as long as it's the most appropriate situation that you're in, most appropriate industry, following that would most definitely allow you to be compliant in terms of your legal obligations as set on the act. And you will also be able to reach the standards that are stipulated under the regulations and mandatory standards. Now, we also have non-mandatory standards, which means that you are allowed to have some variations to it for as long as you are still compliant to the other elements of the act. All right. And then we've got the guidance material that supports everything else that you see right there on the top. So our legislation is nationally governed with jurisdictional powers placed in each state. So remember, it's different. Go to another state, it's a different ballgame, but they're very similar if you think about it. It's always good to be very aware and knowledgeable when it comes to your legislative obligations. And it's so black and white. The more you know and study the act, the more you understand why certain guidelines, certain policies, certain procedures have been developed. Okay, and it's important. So you'll be able to connect and relate. Okay, so this is why we've got this code of practice, because this is what the act is requesting us to do. Not request, but requiring us to do. Okay. What they've said that in 2011, there was such a big change with the implementation of the new legislation. And it was really focused on the degree of accountability for all workers. And also it put a lot of focus on the fines or penalties that could be applied to individuals, to companies, supervisors, management, and directors. And it would depend on the incident and culpability. Okay, so it's a case basis. Businesses are responsible for ensuring that there are systems and processes in place to support work health and safety throughout the workplace. So even if you've got the act and you've got the codes of practice, okay, and you've got the standards, each business is responsible to really assess what's applicable, what to add, what to take out, and create different policies and processes that would support codes of practice, and for us to be able to meet our legal obligations on work health and safety. Now, your role in this is one of setting the standard, enforcing the policy, open communication, encourage it within your team, and ensuring there is adequate amounts of participation. So I'm really sorry, I apologize for some of the typos there, but as they say that as a manager, you cannot expect people to follow policy if they don't fully understand what that policy was made for. So what is the consequence of following that? What's the benefit of following that? And why was this policy created? So for you to know where it's coming from, which is the act, okay, and being able to explain that to another staff member is very empowering, and it's easier for them to follow something that they actually understand. Open communication is about encouraging consultation. Not all of us know everything, okay? So all of us actually would know a lot about particular things based on how much exposure we have and experience in that particular environment. Even with your own duties and responsibilities with different roles, work health and safety impacts us, and how we impact it, in terms of our practices that would influence or impact others are different. So it is very important that we maintain the open communication and always encourage consultation activities to occur, because we need as much information as possible to make a very accurate assessment of certain situations and then have a really good plan. Okay, that's effective. So adequate amounts of participation, not just one person. You don't just ask two people, you ask as many people, everyone, as much as possible, who are affected by certain things, by certain hazards. And the more you ask, the better it is, the safer it becomes. So that's pretty much the message. Now, our next topic is about locating, adapting, adopting, and communicating work health and safety policies. It is important that all of the employees within your organization are able to gain access to work health and safety policies. These policies should be written in accordance with relevant legislation and outline various steps which should be taken for the assurance of health and safety within your workplace. They should highlight certain work health and safety responsibilities of all staff members, and internal policies may be kept on your business premises in filing cabinets or upon your business website. Other internal sources include, we have the manuals and the guidelines, we have reports, we have staff memos, and even through, verbal communication, we get some information from our work colleagues as well. So when we talk about work health and safety policies, these relate to, excuse me, or get organizational views on alcohol and drug use or actions that will be taken if employees are found to be consuming drugs and alcohol in the workplace. So these are just examples. What about safety procedures that specific employees are expected to follow? We've got hazard identification and reporting procedures. The case of Sonic Health Plus, it's about putting entries into Riskman or using a form that you can get out of the intranet to identify, when you've identified a hazard, you need to report that. So something is done, The policies should also include about the appropriate emergency safety procedures that should be followed. It also includes conflict management and how to resolve disputes, and also how we could deal with workplace bullying and discrimination. So those are, there you have the Anti-Bullying and Anti-Discrimination Act. So that is actually included under work health and safety as well. So try to think about Sonic Health. If you wanted to find out more about work health and safety, where do you go? Where do you find it? Is it accessible to you? Is it accessible to other people who work in Sonic, right? Now, it's extremely important that work health and safety documentation is accessible because it impacts everyone. And the timeliness of how a person accesses certain information and how their updated information could actually mean a safety of each person, right? So if somebody spots a hazard, it is extremely important that everyone else who is affected or who may be affected by that hazard is informed straight away. So accessibility and how it's set up is extremely important. Yeah, and it's also in real time. So quite a lot of businesses, what they do is they put that in the intranet and they update it. And they always tell people, all right, if you want to get the most accurate report, have a look at one particular source, okay? Although there must be other sources as well, because we can't be 100% dependent on technology and it could fail. So we should have some backup ways as well in terms of keeping files and making sure that recording and reporting have certain processes just in case we are not able to access the system, So there's so much involved in making sure that communication is always on point when it comes to work health and safety. Now, also templates, certain organizations have different templates for different things. They either made them, okay, or they may have taken that from external organizations or sources. There are also policies, which you could say are general, okay, and it's designed for general application throughout your organization, and they will customize it depending on the situation, right? So when it comes to work health and safety, you have to be very particular about who is involved, what sort of tasks are involved, what's the environment like, okay? So what are the risks at the back of hazards in that particular environment and how many are affected? So there's so many questions that need to be answered. Now, it might be necessary to adapt such policies and make them more applicable to the work carried out by employees within specific departments and work areas. So again, being very specific, you should consider the duties that they are expected to perform and the ways in which you can increase the suitability of work health and safety policies. So it is actually an expectation that each business should customize the work health and safety application, okay, and how we follow the law based on the different factors and elements in a particular work area. It is necessary to write in easily understandable terms and confirm the agreement of workers within your organization. So the type of language that should be used in any report, on a template, on memos, for example, or the manual, has to be easily understood by anyone that is involved in that work area. Okay, so it is an expectation, and make sure that people have confirmed their agreement to policies and processes. So if they actually don't agree with that, then we are not following what is expected of us. We're not going to be able to deliver. So it is so important that people are being shown what is expected of them, and they're meant to agree to say, yep, I accept it, that is my responsibility. And that's why we collect evidence that people have gone through training on work health and safety, or they've gone through induction and onboarding, so on and so forth. So documentary evidence of making sure that agreement has been taken and it's been confirmed by everyone in that work area is quite important. All right. So work health and safety legislation may include, we've got the applicable Commonwealth and state or territory work health safety acts. We've got the regulations and codes of practice. We have common law duties to meet general duty of care requirements. Okay. And we have work health and safety legislative and regulatory requirements for these ones. Okay. So let's be very specific. We've got effectively managing hazards. We have establishing consultation agreements or arrangements. As I've mentioned a while ago, we need to consult different people in different roles, okay, including those for health and safety representatives and health and safety committees. So now we are now starting to mention special people in health and safety. So in a business, they would appoint health and safety representatives. Okay, and they're special in such a way that they're required to complete certain training. Okay, they need to be certified to be appointed as representatives, because they're the ones who should know a lot about the law, how they could encourage consultation, how they're meant to get consultation, how they're meant to report things that they uncover. They're meant to be going around, and you must be able to trust them to do the right thing and say the right thing and take the right information. Okay, and then you've got the health and safety committees. Normally in a lot of businesses, we have the HR department involved. We've got even the senior executives involved. We've got department heads involved. So these are the people that make the big decisions when it comes to work health and safety. So we call them the committee. All right. So they stand on top of the ladder when it comes to making big, hard decisions on work health and safety. Providing information and training is also covered under regulatory requirements and legislation, okay, including training in safe operating procedures, SOP. We got procedures for workplace hazards, hazard identification, risk assessment, and risk control, and emergency and evacuation procedures. So it is a requirement that, it's a regulatory requirement that should be covered in manual. We must cover those things. And then we've got other requirements for the maintenance and confidentiality of records of occupational injury and disease, which absolutely relates to Sonic Health Plus. So we've got that there. Okay. So the specifics and features of your policies will vary according to the nature and scope of work of your organization, or that your organization does. But there are certain issues which should always be covered regardless of your industry. So there are certain general, or what they call common ones, and it should be the following. These are the common ones that must be covered under the policy. So if I were Sonic Health, I'd go, okay, that's the act. These are the codes of practice that apply to us in the health industry. And then let's try to customize it based on what's actually happening in our business in different areas. So before we customize that, there are certain elements that apply to everyone and everything, all right, when it comes to work health and safety, and these are the ones. So they just use those. And these are what you call commitment to establishing a safe and healthy workplace. So it's the same across the board in any industry. We've got hazards and risks associated with each job, workplace, and location. We got the awareness of relevant guidelines, regulations, and legislation. We got procedures to be followed for each specific area of work, responsibilities of each employee according to their position, expectations for communication and cooperation, and then we've got commitment to regular reviews of policies and procedures. So in this icon here, or what's called image here, it shows that everything crosses over each other, but those points need to be covered in any type of business, okay, by any type of business. As previously mentioned, you should ensure that your policies are directly relevant to the work carried out by the employees within your organization. They should be able to read the policies easily and understand, and gain an improved understanding of the organizational commitment to work health and safety, and steps that should be taken for general safety. You should account for differences in the cultural and ethnic backgrounds of your workers. So you're not just following the law in terms of, work health and safety, but it also includes, being very inclusive in terms and very considerate about the different ways people understand, communicate, and perceive certain things, so that's important as well. And it is your obligation to ensure that work health and safety policies are communicated appropriately. It might be necessary to create versions in different languages and hold meetings to confirm the employee's understanding. And ways of communicating these particular policies could include, having induction, which we all go through, and it could be written or verbal or both. We've got writing and distributing manuals. We've got holding joint health and safety committee meetings. Okay, so we've got providing details in job descriptions, which is another way, and we've got holding safety talks and meetings, which must actually happen as frequently as possible. Now, I think I'll stop right there, and just for this particular topic, just to summarize it, we all know that it is our legal obligation, okay, in the business, and it doesn't only affect the business owners. It is for everyone, it's keeping yourself safe, keeping others safe. To know what is required of you, you need to understand the law. You need to understand what codes of practice are available for you to actually have a look at. It is very hard to create certain guidelines without any reference material, without any help from experts. And these codes of practice were actually created by experts, and guaranteed it really supports the standards and the act really well. So there you go. I hope you now understand more about work health and safety in terms of the law and what's required by the law to everyone. I will then discuss more topics later on, but this is our first of many videos that I should be sending you with work health and safety. Till the next time. Thank you for listening and viewing.